What is going on, everybody? And welcome to the post Black Friday, Cyber Monday webinar extreme, where we're going to be getting into the weeds about anything and everything that happened, the good, the bad, the ugly, and really getting super tactical, nitty gritty with it, because everyone is having the woosah moment right now. That the busy 12 or the 5 is now past you, but you don't want to pump the brakes just yet, because there's a lot of data to be going through to parlay you into Q1 and all that kind of good stuff. So my name is John Aspinall, Chief Evangelist here at Trellis, and I'm joined with a ton of geniuses here today in the space that we're going to really get into all those tactical things to talk about what you could be doing now, what you could be doing for next time, and all that sort of good stuff. So with us, we have Tasia Trellis, who is the head of ecom growth. We have Andrew Morgans from Marknology, and we have Martin Zeruto from the Growth Lab. So guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. And we'll go around the table really quickly for anyone that doesn't know you folks. Talk a little bit more about what you do, why you do it, what you love, your favorite color. I'm just kidding on the last part. So Tasia, go ahead and just talk a little bit about what you do here.
I think a lot of it day to day is working with partners like Drew, Martin, and some of our other brands and agencies. Honestly, looking at the data, analyzing it, identifying trends, patterns, commonalities that we all see, and how do we leverage that and improve every year as we go into the same tentpole events.
Awesome. And I'm gonna do dealer's choice here. I'm gonna go Drew.
Yeah, hi, welcome everybody that's here. Excited to kind of recap Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I think this is like my 15th since I've been working on Amazon. So it was a good year, I think, overall. I'm excited to share kind of like what we've learned and what we can take into next year.
Sweet, awesome. Martin.
Hey guys, Martin, CRO of the Growth Lab, and I love joining these kind of webinars because it's very transparent in terms of things that we tried, things that worked, things that didn't work, and I think for those who we work with as clients, for those who we work with as partners, and for those who we hope to work with in the future, it's a great opportunity to provide some insight on how we accomplish certain things and how it might align with some of your goals for next year. So happy to be here.
Awesome. And before we get into it, we have some questions, and we're going to pepper you guys with just a little housekeeping. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, if one of our pros hits you with something where you're like, what, that doesn't make sense, drop a comment below. We're happy to go into it a little bit further. If you want anything specific, drop those comments in there. Also, you might be wondering, where is that handsome Ali? Well, Ali actually had to go to something, got pulled away. We do miss him right now and wish he was here, but he will catch the replay. And if you want to ask him anything specific, drop it in the comments. We'll make sure he emails you back. But that being said, folks, I'm going to ask some questions. Really, anyone could just jump into it and give some feedback and ping off of each other and that kind of stuff. But guys, what surprised you most about this year's BFCM performance in the Amazon space?
I think from a managing client expectations perspective, we're a full service Amazon agency, and we also do a couple of other marketplaces as well. And I think, since the beginning of this year, there was very much a different perspective on how, I guess, global e-commerce was going to go. It was hit with a couple of changes, and notwithstanding those changes, I think clients' expectations, some maintained very bullish. They're like, hey, Prime Days, tentpole events, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we're going to crush it regardless. And having to manage those expectations have been challenging because it's kind of like ostrich, with your head in the sand. Like, we can't ignore certain tailwinds or headwinds going in either way, depending on where you're selling and what you're selling, right? But on the flip side, it was great to see that there were certain categories and certain products and certain brands that did very, very well. And because they had a strategic partner to position them to still leverage some of these tentpole events effectively, whether it's from a top line perspective or from a margin perspective, then managing those expectations despite some of these, global economic challenges was very, very easy. And obviously, we utilize Trellis and it allows us to provide some data-driven, visualizations that allow us to manage those expectations very objectively. And I think that was probably one of the key learnings, is that there's going to be those who, regardless of what's happening in the world, are going to be entrenched in their beliefs of what they think should happen during these temple events, and then there are others who are kind of like the perfect ideal customer who are willing to work with you collaboratively as a strategic partner, and make the most out of these events despite what's happening.
Did you see, Martin, a lot of the customers there that who you called your ideal customer be specific to a category, or did you see that across any category there were those customers who were realistic about BFCM, had the right expectations, the right strategies going into it?
Yeah, great question. I think when you start nearing like the more SMB to maybe lower to high tier, so right when you're about to hit enterprise, once you've hit that threshold, then you start working with clients who have a little bit more long-term strategic vision. I think in the past, very small SMB type clients who maybe didn't have so much deep either marketplace knowledge or ad spend budget thought like, hey, these are our events where we're going to cash out. These are our events where we're going to really, break through. And that's just not how Amazon is today. And that's not a good thing, nor is it a bad thing. That's just the reality of how the marketplace is, regardless. I mean, there are certain categories and certain niches that if you find, product market fit and, an opening that nobody else is selling, you can always break through. But, for the most part, brands that aren't, funded for long-term vision and long-term growth are not going to see as immediate or as quick gains during these type of events, versus brands that have a little bit more long-term vision and budget are able to implement a long-term strategy. Those were the ones that are a lot more easier to work with and saw better results, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. I think on a data standpoint, when I look at it as well, and I look at the subset of those, like you said, just above that mid-level business and going into that enterprise, what was interesting, I don't know if either of you've seen this in your accounts, is where I actually saw like efficiencies of the advertising campaigns increase significantly leading into the BFCM and then peak during the BFCM, especially the 5-day window. And what was interesting is CPCs weren't going up for these guys. If anything, they were actually lowering their CPCs throughout that window. And days 9 and 12, especially your Friday and the Mondays, right, when the volume and the sales are there, right, conversions on average were, I would say, were up anywhere 15 to 20% compared to that T12 lead-in. Which was interesting is these guys have found a way to scale their volume without having that cost pressure and thinking about profitability and margins and so forth, which is kind of the opposite of what you would typically see, right? I think people going into a BFCM or a Turkey or Tentpole, they think, hey, we got to be competitive. I got to spend a lot on ads. I got to get top of search visibility. And they kind of go full aggressive mode versus at that enterprise level, I actually saw them being smart about it, being the exact opposite of what everybody was doing. Love to hear your guys' thoughts on what you saw amongst your clients.
Yeah, so I would push back on that a little bit from what I saw, in that I think there's a lot of like unknown factors that's affecting the economy, right? From the government layoffs, that's a huge portion of our of our customers to an extent, to tariffs, to just like and I was expecting, I think, like a lot of purchases that were like everyday items that you need anyway, like you're going to need them anyway. And so then people were kind of just waiting on those deals to buy in bulk. And like, I think we did see some of that across brands, because we have a lot of brands that are CPGs and and all different types of products. I think if you have an agency helping you, then you're not going to make those drastic, like raise the CPCs and run these crazy deals. Because generally we're going to say, if you're not in a specific category like this, then you're just giving away margin. So we're kind of the ones advising, not saying they couldn't come to that on their own, but like if they're being managed or assisted, like someone that's on Trellis, for an example, we're saying, hey, actually it's about making your budget last longer.
Yeah.
Don't give away as much margin, and let's ride this. And I think when times are tough or tight, around the holidays, people are also very deal focused. Whereas maybe like they don't always care on a deal, and now they're like that 10 or 15% matters. And so, hey, even if I'm not getting a crazy deal, like I'm expected to get in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I can still get 10 or 15%. And this year that matters. I'm thinking psychologically, and I do think like, because we did see like a pretty traditional year, like it ramped up super early.
Yeah.
Keeps getting earlier and earlier, but like still saw that traditional Black Friday, Cyber Monday lift. Brands still holding on to margin if they were doing it well. We didn't have any stock outs, which for us, like across our portfolio, is like a huge win.
Yeah.
To go through the holidays, because you get to keep that momentum forward. So I guess my only pushback is that I saw it across all shapes of brands, not just the like medium large, but even our small brands were executing pretty well. We're still recapping some of the data today, like just like how well did we do exactly. But I saw across, we also don't have a lot of I think like we don't have a lot of electronic brands where you can get like some of these really big discounts and things like that. We have like the more traditional, I would say, I feel like that's a loose term, but yeah. So I think we saw like, I think a lot of that was just like more learnings, and then just like what's happening in the economy affected us a bit too.
So I'm curious too. So someone come, not so much from the outside, but I'm going to ask questions as if I am, right? So when we look at ads, right, wondering, did certain paid ad performance or certain types from what you guys have seen perform better than others? Now, I know I asked Tasia this yesterday, and Tasia's like, well, sponsored products, right? So that's a given, right? Sponsored products is pretty much the bread and butter for a lot of advertising, right? But I'm curious if you guys can go a little bit deeper and more granular with certain things, like certain methods of DSP or certain other ad types that you guys have seen actual perform or actually not perform as well as they did maybe last time. So if you guys can talk a little bit about that.
Martin, you want to go first?
Yeah, just very broadly, don't want to get super duper technical for some of the, and maybe we can, maybe those who are like geniuses like Tasia, but I guess, when they announced to AMC for sponsored ads about a year and a half ago, it was such an esoteric thing for a lot of people. I remember sitting in that, it was in Austin, right, where they was talking about it, and they announced it, and everybody in the crowd was either like, oh, cool, or like, what does that mean, right? Like, how does that work? And then, for the next year, we were going back and forth with our various Amazon partners and reps and trying to, implement it and utilize it. And then, of course, different ad platforms, similar to Trellis, have started utilizing it, creating queries and reports and blah, blah, that you can now utilize for sponsored ads. So I think that approach to understanding your audiences and leveraging it from a sponsored ads perspective, knowing that sponsored products can be the most viable for these types of tentpole events, I think was probably the biggest lever and shift from a strategy standpoint. I mean, any brand that is in the realm of utilizing DSP should already have a healthy and functioning PPC foundation already. And so I think naturally, if you compare brand A versus brand B, they both have the same amount of PPC ad spend, but brand B is utilizing DSP. They've layered AMC insights to understand who those customers are, and then now they're utilizing it to double down on their sponsored ads. That just naturally will give them more lift during these types of events, because you know who you're targeting. You have a lot more levers to pull in terms of an ad spend, efficiency and scale wise. And so I think, if you're any kind of brand out there that's like, hey, is there any kind of diminishing returns if I just keep dumping money into sponsored product? There is. As good as it is, there are other, advanced tactics that layer on and compound the success of sponsored product, and that is DSP, AMC, and then obviously going back into AMC audiences for sponsored ads. So I hope that's more of like a medium type answer to provide some context on like what was the most effective that we saw for our brands, for sure.
I'll go with something a little bit out of left field, which was, in addition to that, kind of like a DSP play, since you covered that, was we do a bit of TikTok shop with a couple brands. We have about 6 or 7. And they saw crazy Black Friday, Cyber Mondays, which is like maybe our second real one on TikTok shop, where we're like trying to align the TikTok strategy and the Amazon strategy together and like really see how that affects us. But we saw crazy growth there, which I didn't know how it was going to affect Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but because we're running the Amazon as well, we're able to just kind of see what's that brand search lift look like as if a halo effect onto Amazon, and just helped our metrics even more, which was like really, really cool with those brands. One was like a really hard to ship, heavier price item that I was just excited to see it grow. And John, it was actually like a customer I met the last time I was in Jersey with you. So it's from that event, and we really had a really successful Black Friday, Cyber Monday with his products. So that's really exciting. On the DSP, was just kind of straightforward for us. We don't have like a lot of DSP running. We run a lot of sponsored display. And I think this is a time where if I'm even backing off of sponsored brand, unless I have some videos like really crushing, I'll keep the videos going. I back off of sponsored brand a bit because it can be hard to gauge that traffic and you're just getting a lot of viewers and clicks. So we do push SP up. SPV would keep going. And obviously now there's sponsored products video, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in prompts and things like that. But sponsored product, sponsored brand video, sponsored brand we pull down, sponsored display. I really like to gather that or keep that traffic that comes in during the BFCM event with sponsored display. So sometimes we even ramp up sponsored display after. If it wasn't already running lean before, we actually start picking it up more than we do after Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So that's one that I like to run the rest of the holiday, kind of heavier and more aggressive after the big event.
Yeah, and I think double clicking on what both of you guys are saying there, right? I think people who layered some sort of display, whether it's an SD tactic or a DSP on top of the sponsored product, I saw have better tailwinds going into the 5-day window. I think they had better tailwinds going into the post BFCM period and still capturing the last minute shoppers, right? Even me, like after Cyber Monday, I was still buying on Amazon because I completely forgot of some of the things that I needed. And so you still have that pool of audience, as much as it may be a small audience, but those are easy wins that you can pick off that others aren't thinking about anymore, right? And I think when I look at the trends and I see peak amount of impression, I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but impressions were high during that first kind of day 1 till day 6-ish, and traffic was coming in, but there was a lot of add to carts when I look at the AMC data sets, right? People were still adding to carts and they had the mindset of, and I find myself doing this, right? I went to a local retail store, I was looking at Dyson Vacuum and they had pre-Black Friday deals. And I was like, yo, during Black Friday, actually, is the discount going to go higher, right? And can I get a better discount? And the same thing I was seeing on Amazon, right? As much as there were early deals, people were hoping to see a better deal in the actual 5-day window. So a lot of add to carts, and this is kind of where I think you guys both did great stuff, is layering that DSP and SD. You can capitalize on all the people who've added to cart, who haven't incentivized or haven't purchased, have a nice creative around it, different wordings. You can tell them that it's a better value prop that they're getting, and you actually pick up the guys who didn't convert on that BFCM window, right? Which was, and I see that every year. But what surprises me is a lot of brands, especially brands who don't work with partners or don't have great agencies like yourself supporting them, they're thinking it very one-dimensional.
100%. If I can toss in kind of like a personal anecdote, in my late teens, early 20s, I actually was working retail at a store in a mall, and similar to, we have this thing in Canada called Boxing Day, which I guess is equivalent to Black Friday, right? So it's December 26th, and leading up to Boxing Day at our store, it started off on Monday at 30% off, and then on Wednesday it's 40% off, and Thursday it's 50%, and then, oh my goodness, it's Boxing Day now, it's like 60% off, right? So there's two mindsets, right, for the consumer. It's like, I could probably wait till Boxing Day, I could probably wait till Black Friday, I could probably wait till Cyber Monday to get the absolute maximum, maybe lightning deal that I can find there. However, you run the risk, similar to my retail example, is that by the time you get there at 60% off, you're stuck with triple XLs. Like, there's no more sizes, there's no more stock, there's no more choices, right? So I think that's also something that I find interesting every year, not just from managing clients from an agency perspective, but also as a shopping perspective. Do I want to risk them not having that deal tomorrow or by the end of the week because I want to save another $5? Versus having the assurance that by the time this thing is over, I got the things that I needed to get, and there was still a marginal amount of discount. Now, on the flip side, what I found interesting was that both in the retail and on e-commerce, a lot of people are like, wait a minute, I'm not even seeing any kind of deals here, like 15% off, 20% off. This isn't really something that's compelling for me. So I feel like it's such an interesting dichotomy where ads kind of have to navigate the psychology of the customer that you're trying to sell to versus the landscape in which they're shopping in. So, for example, we have a pretty well-known electronics brand that sells LED lights, RGB, all that stuff. I'm a gamer, so I'm like, I love all the stuff that they do. They crushed it 1,000% because the mindset of the consumer is like, this is where I buy all my tech. But for certain brands that aren't not in that category, you have to. It's always going to be a different seasonal play because the economics of what's happening in the world versus what's happening in your consumer's mind will always be different. I know that sounds kind of esoteric, but I hope that makes kind of sense.
Well, I think that was really great. And what it made me think about while you're talking was honestly the products that I like put into my cart and didn't buy, or that I like noticed like, man, I was too late, were very category specific once you mentioned that. And it was basically like clothes. Like I was looking for something for my girlfriend or my sisters or my mom, and either like a color was out or a size was out, or I had to pick a different color with a different size. So, I think that was the case. And it was like 3 different instances where it was clothing or apparel. So whereas if I'm buying the headlamp, the LED headlamp, maybe it's a matter of getting % off, but when the %'s off, I could still buy it. It wouldn't be out of stock, so like, I'm just missing the 15% or the 20%. So it wasn't as urgent, I guess, or I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to jump. So I think, that could be a difference in consumers, male, female, them knowing their brands. Like my girlfriend was trying to buy from Zara or like, one of those sites like that. And everything was like that day, like that night, that evening, the first like Thanksgiving evening was like, they hit the sales early or something like that, or at midnight. They were all looking on there trying to grab items because they like go super, super fast. They're like aggressive deals. And it kind of felt like the old days where they were doing stuff that's like first 100 customers get, membership for a year for free, and doing a lot of that kind of urgent stuff. And some brands don't have that built into their mechanics, like of how their brand can operate, where they're giving away VIP memberships or they're giving away certain exclusive drops. But I think that a lot of like female clothing specifically has these like drops, these capsule drops. And the same thing kind of was the case on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So I think you're exactly right.
That's a great point too. That reminds me real quick that when you mentioned Zara, I remember, when they released their app, like I'm a huge Zara consumer as well. They released an app, and what they've started doing now to, I guess, combat some of these tentpole events is you download the app. They're going to provide you with the day before this, a Black Friday comes out, or a day before a Prime Day, and they'll have a specific deal that's only available on the app, that's only available at a certain time. And so going back to my Boxing Day example, I remember last year I was on my phone and I had my cart, as my cat clicks on my mute button, I had my cart loaded up with all of my items on the app, and I'm like 8:57, 8:59, 9 o'clock. Okay, the deal is available on the app. And then I buy. So I think certain categories are not going to compete with app marketplaces because they don't have huge, Fortune 500 brands that have their own infrastructure and D2C that funnels into an app. But some categories unfortunately do. And that's also what you have to be aware of, is that even though you have a great deal, even though you have a pretty good market share in your category, some of these brands are going to go all in to make sure that they're diverting traffic and attention and ultimately spending and purchase intention towards their own ecosystem. And if they have them captured into an app, that's a lot more intention and a lot more, I guess, penetration into their buying habits versus just going on Amazon as a marketplace versus having a dedicated app. I have the Uniqlo app, I have the Zara app. I'm locked in, guys. So if you're going to give me a deal the day before where I'm going to go on Amazon, I'll probably look at the app first.
And you knew what brands, like you had the app, you knew, like you've been a Zara customer for a while, you knew what would happen, you knew if you wanted it, you needed to grab it quickly. And that's all created by the brand and their culture and the way that they're doing anything and everything. So doesn't have to just be, I have a pup that he's big Doberman. I never wanted him to be food aggressive or like jump on people or eat, like there's a couple of rules I had. And I operate like he only eats like when I'm eating. So even if I leave food down, he just doesn't really eat it. Like, and the thinking being is like, if the food's always there, there's never this like urgency. Like I need to eat it. I need to like get it while it's there, or else Drew's going to pick it up. That's right. Same thing with like a consumer. If you don't have a brand that's built around these drops or exclusivity, or these will all sell out, then that's not there. And a lot of Amazon sellers are always in stock. Like that is part of the game, is to constantly be in stock, especially if you're like a CPG doing subscribe and save. So then the only thing that you're doing that's different is that deal. And you're not going to run out of stock, because if you did, like that's against the 10 commandments of selling on Amazon, right? So
correct.
Just some interesting thinking, I think, on like how a brand approaches how they do things like that.
So I think it's a super interesting segue into talking about categories, right? So going into the holiday shopping season, and then seasonality and which categories are performing well versus ones that aren't. I'm curious to see your guys's standpoint in, obviously giftable items is going to be a throwaway. That's always going to do well this time. But also looking at things like supplements, where historically Q1 is their Q4 with the whole new year, new me. What are you guys seeing as far as categories that previously would do well last year and the year before that didn't do so well this year, or other categories that maybe took off this year versus others?
Martin, you want to go first?
I'm actually looking at the sheet and I'm trying to see like if there's a pattern in categories. What I'm seeing so far, what if you were to ask me before, like, hey, is linens, like bedding and like home goods gonna crush it? I'm not gonna, go all in and put all the chips on it, but we saw that it did. And you mentioned, Andrew, a little bit of TikTok as well. We do a little bit of TikTok shop as well, and a lot of the value of investing in external traffic is obviously you're building some of that intent, building some of that organic traffic beyond competing for all that attention on Amazon. And so what I found is that with the onset of TikTok, it's not just about dancing and trends or what have you, but it's a lot of education around products. And a lot of that education is now creating like a tiered system of like, hey, what is considered luxury in soap? What is considered luxury in linens? And I've come across multiple, and I guess it's been cultivated in my For You page, like different influencers that are providing education on if you're going to buy bed sheets, this is like the product that you're buying, or are you buying the marketing? Okay, if you want to buy this type of brand, are you buying the brand or are you buying the product, right? So they're qualifying and educating consumers. And for one of the brands that we had that absolutely crushed it, I found them mentioned in these videos multiple times. And I mean, we did our own due diligence to make sure that we're utilizing TikTok as much as we can, but ultimately engaging in social commerce and building some of that education and intent saw some really great dividends, in the category that it's happening in. When it comes to things like linen, like who would have thought that bed sheets was going to be a category that people actually, resonate with on TikTok, but they do. And so I think being conscious of how creators and influencers are latching onto and creating, small communities around educating around your category and product is so key in terms of maximizing these types of tentpole events. And so in terms of what categories stood out, I think it's the categories that are willing to get some exposure on some of these external channels, right? If you feel like, hey, I've built a moat on Amazon, I have differentiation, my margins are good, great. At some point, unless you have some super duper proprietary thing that nobody else has, that's going to erode. And one of the ways that erodes is, with your competitors creating a strategy around education and generating external intent and traffic that comes back, especially around these types of tentpole events. So I think, category wise, things that you think are sleeper categories that really wouldn't hit, we're crushing it for us. And for us, it was like, I guess, home goods, bedding, stuff like that.
I would say, kind of echoing what we said earlier, which is, I think people are buying gifts, okay, but also in buying them earlier to spread out their spending between November and December instead of just like getting stuff really close to December, which is what you do if you have money and you're lazy, is wait to the last minute. If you're more poor and budget conscious, you're trying to spend it out, spread it out across paychecks and, get stuff done. You just have to be more on your stuff, looking for deals. But I think people are still going to celebrate Christmas in a big way, just it's going to be a little bit different. And so I know that's what I've echoed to our family, and what we're doing is just like everybody's a little tight. I'm like, just start earlier, keep it small. But also I think a lot of people are buying, I think there's that premium that just stays premium. Like it's going to just do what it does. Like people are not necessarily looking for deals when it comes to premium. I don't feel like if you're a great quality product at a good price and trying to convey that you're actually more premium than people know, that's like, that's a way to be in the middle. I mean, I love Buffy sheets. I think that's what premium is, Buffy sheets. I don't know like what any other brand exists after I've tried those, but if you happen to be working with them, just tell them I'm a super fan. But no, like I had to have someone educate me. It was probably a TikTok or something, and I was like, "What is this?" I tried a couple years ago, but I think it's just like, so even like to me, betting is like an essential. Like it is kind of like a home good essential, as much as other things. And like that's what I feel like people are buying this year is like things that are like useful. They're gifting them, but like I'm getting I'm getting this for mom as a new set, like things that are practical, things that are just like make sense outside of like that toy category. So and then if you think about what we said earlier about CPC staying somewhat lower and like not margin eroding, well, that's what we did across all of our brands. So almost like all of our categories saw a lift and didn't see margin erosion. So you can do somewhat successful in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, even if you're not one of those like steep discount brands that had an amazing mountaintop type of event. We still saw lift. So like I would say success across the categories as long as things were done like an intentional strategic way, then yeah, we saw it across all of them. Everybody saw a lift, even foods.
Yeah, even the same thing here. I think what I noticed was, like you said, there's essentials, which people are going to buy regardless, and all of those product lines are going to do well. But then you also have those nice to want premium end products where these are more behaviorally primed, I would say, right? They're not really looking for those heavy discounts. You do a bare minimum coupon on it still during a BFC. So that product will still sell because they do a lot of off Amazon marketing. They build that brand presence, right? Speaking of textiles, like I got sold on Hush blankets because they had a nice little promotion. It showed up on my Instagram, showed up on my TikTok, and they're like, hey, you get 2 extra pillows and cooling bed sheets. I'm like, done, sign me up, right? And I already go and buy off of that. But I think whether it's your CPGs, and I think Drew brought up a good point there, right? People are doing early Christmas shopping still, right? And these are all going to be your sub $40 price point product lines where it's impulse buy, it's easy to buy. You see a nice little discount on it, and you're like, great, I'm getting a good deal. I can go gift this to people. And so what I found is anything below that $40 price point would do really, really well. Like every one of those products would sell. But then had you gone up a price point, if there isn't any sort of that kind of D2C marketing strategy behind it and driving awareness, building the brand, right? Those higher than product lines wouldn't sell as much, but if you had that marketing behind it, those would do well regardless of a deal happening or not.
So I think it's interesting that you guys, I think Martin, you spoke about like having the app and, you know, brands tripling down on their own kind of platform. Like it's so obvious even for a shopper like me. For example, I have the Nike app and the sneakers app, which is like the Nike alternative app for certain drops. But it's so funny, the sneakers that I buy, which are like the retro Jordans, the foam posits, things like those almost never go on sale. They're never on a Black Friday or Cyber Monday deal. But the other editions or the other tiers and the other lines of Nikes will be heavily discounted. So I think it's super interesting to see how brands will have their flagship or their top line, and they won't change that for branding integrity, but they will go down on pricing on certain other levels of it. So I think that's really, really interesting. But I want to go into this really quickly. We have peppered in the T word, you know, TikTok, and I think it's really interesting to ask the question of, with the rise of TikTok and TikTok Live, and you know, people getting educated over there and going to buy on Amazon, or getting educated there and then buying there, because I have been the victim of getting doom scrolling and stuck on a live and buying on the TikTok Live, even though I said I'd always be an Amazon shopper, but it's just so compelling. So from your guys' perspective, have you noticed from brands that are doing TikTok and Amazon, are the numbers increasing on Amazon because of what they're doing on TikTok? Or is it the alternate where they're losing traction because the sales actually being made on TikTok? I think that's an interesting thing to take a look at, right? For brands to double and triple down on, because at the end of the day, it's good for the brand either way, but it's important to know what lever is driving that.
Go ahead, Andrew. I was just going to say a couple of numbers that, you know, we pulled. I'm just pulling up the slide now. So when we're pitching TikTok Shop to brands, right, on Amazon, and we're explaining to them what is the opportunity here, we actually don't frame it like, hey, the opportunity is now, in the sense of like, you need to get in before anybody else does. It's actually the opposite. You need to get in now because brands are getting on faster and faster. And so, not that the window is closing, but the amount of competitors just continue to rise. We did like a very short analysis, and what we saw was it's roughly 400 existing Amazon brands are joining TikTok Shop every single day. Now, of course, that's spread across different categories, and their implementation have, from very well done to, hey, I'm just gonna hand it off to a VA and see, run it on autopilot. But can you imagine, like, your competitor is getting onto this thing 400 a day? And when was TikTok Shop integrated fully and be able to do multi-channel fulfillment, all that stuff, like earlier this year, right? So it's insane in terms of halo effect. So what we were seeing from an average Amazon sales lift, so baby products 5 to 10% halo, pet products 25%, skincare 80%, and then the craziest is supplements, like 300%, right? Because people want to know what's the new thing, especially now, new year, new me, January, I want to get healthy. There's always a new ingredient, seafoam moss or colostrum or whatever. That's where they go. They go on TikTok. They either get served an ad talking about a new ingredient, or they watch their influencer talking about something that they were paid to talk about. And so what we see is the average is about 25%. It's not a guarantee that just because you're running TikTok Shop, you're going to see a 25% lift in your overall Amazon sales. But at the end of the day, again, it's like similar to, even if you're just going to do sponsored display. Without sponsored display or DSP, you have no external voice. So do you want to have a voice or do you not want to have a voice? And if 400 brands are going onto this place where everyone wants to hear their voice, and your competitors are there speaking, and they're speaking to the people that you want to talk to, but you're not there with your own voice, then, am I saying every brand needs to be on TikTok? No. Am I saying every brand should be on TikTok? Yes. Right. I hope that distinction kind of makes sense.
No, I think that was well put. Am I saying every brand should be? No. Am I saying every brand should be? Yes. Honestly, I think I think of Storage Wars, and like, they're literally selling like storage units that no one wants, full of junk, and they turned into a reality show that's been going for decade plus. There's a level of interest that people just have in all types of products and trades and DIYs and these home repairs. Not everybody has an uncle to call, and so we're on TikTok looking at, how do I do this thing on my new house as I'm 40 years old, and discovering products that let you hang stuff quicker. And there's just this level of self-teaching that went from YouTube, and now I think even TikTok does a lot of that. And it's educational or it's entertaining. What is it? Some of it is just like, if not now, when? And there's a certain learning curve to doing anything well. And so, the encouragement is to start now, so you can start working through that learning curve and figuring out, what that is. I love the brands that are doing, I saw a brand doing this really well. It was like a women's clothing brand. I was kind of auditing another brand and looking at who was doing stuff well. And they definitely were pushing from Instagram Reels and TikTok videos. But on their Amazon A+ page, they had almost like it was looking like a phone with a picture, like a selfie. And it was different UGC models, not like supermodels. But I'm 5'9", 135, wearing a medium dress, or wearing a size 4 or whatever it was. And they went through different models, and it just looked very much like, not super professional, but UGC done right, and they were showing off the sizes. That's the main issue with Amazon returns and things like that. And so it very much was we know that traffic is coming from TikTok or Reels, we know that. And so we're just going to lean into that and really optimize our content on Amazon to make them feel at home, like they landed on the right dress or the right brand that they were looking for. We've copied that with a couple supplement companies as well, where we know they're being discovered on YouTube or on TikTok, because that's where the big influencer is. And then we want to make the Amazon page reflect that. I think that the halo effect is a game changer for brands that don't have big brand awareness. So it's almost a bigger deal if you're not a big brand. So if you're an enterprise brand or a well-known brand with brand search, we're going to crush it on TikTok Shop. I have 95, 96%, we're gonna crush it on TikTok if you already have brand awareness. If you don't, and we're starting with a brand, let's say an Amazon native brand that wants to start driving off Amazon traffic, It's harder to get you started. We have to like figure out content. There's not going to be people just jumping on your brand name and understand what's going on. Hard to get influencers. But once we start driving that traffic, that impact of the conversion rates and click-through rates and things you get on Amazon because of that halo effect is a game changer for a brand that doesn't have brand awareness on Amazon. Like, so all of a sudden you're getting even 10% or 15% or 20% of your sales coming from a branded search that has high intent, high conversion. It's driving sales velocity, driving momentum. And you normally have to get that by just clicking on binoculars for hunting or whatever, like new to brand customer searches. And now you're getting those branded ones added to what you're doing. I think that is really the value that we're talking about. And it's not converting here. It's that extra boost you're getting that you're kind of not having to compete on. Like your branded searches, you really shouldn't have to compete on. So you're just getting absolute traffic coming there to buy. And that's the intangible for a smaller brand that doesn't have that brand awareness that now is getting it. I think that's a game changer to the algorithm and overall how Amazon works.
And I think net across everything both of you guys are saying and the value of TikTok or Instagram Reels or off these social advertising is, and the way Amazon is shifting, right, with Rufus and AI, and a lot of it is now they're taking the lens of audience-based advertising, right? Whether it's TikTok, at the end of the day, a lot of people when they buy are very emotional, right? They instill an emotion in terms of the shopper and the psyche behind it, and that's what makes them buy. Those are the impulse purchases, right? So when I look and I talk with one of our brands, and he was telling me how he was killing it on TikTok, he sells arts and crafts, right? And if you think about the demographic and audiences, it's going to be my nieces, nephews, the kids who are on it and just doom scrolling. They see all these different arts and crafts product lines. They end up going to their parents or their uncles and whatnot and say, hey guys, this $20 is a deal. Can we buy this, right? There's an emotion instilled in them. You're then sentimented to that emotion as well. You're like, great, I'll buy this as well, right? And so now it's all audience-based targeting. Now you have all these audiences, the people you want to go afterwards. Now you then take that back, you can feedback loop into your AMC data sets. Now you start to build your own first-party data sets and then say, great, well, Amazon has the biggest customer pool, right? 8 out of 10 people will start their journey there. So now let's create lookalike audiences off of that who are going to be similar and kind of take the strategy that Meta or Google and these guys are doing. And so now it's going to become not a keyword-based driven, what's the most important keyword? I think it starts to become, what's the ideal customer for my product, for my brand at different price points? And at the different price levels, right, I have my Halo product. Now, what can I do from that Halo product, right? Can I create virtual bundles on top of it now with the ability to do advertisements directly through that? How can I drive cross-sell opportunities, right? If I have, and we take the textiles, right, I have pillows and I have cooling bed sheets. Now I have duvet covers, or can I create a bundle around that? There are different colors that are going to do well? And so how do you blend all of that together? I think at the core of it is going to come at understanding your customers. And all of that is going to be more important because then sponsored product just can't be enough, right? That's where you have to take that whole full funnel strategy. And this is where Amazon's headed. And I think all the brands and agencies who get that and are doing that, I think those brands are going to succeed in terms of the long-term success of where Amazon is, right? And because profitability is a hit, margin's a hit, and the way the economic is, things are just getting more and more expensive. And so if you want to be ahead of that curve, I think you got to look at it in that lens across the board and not just think about, okay, what's the right keyword? What's the right bid? How do I compete against displays? I think those guys are going to start to realize they just can't last long enough.
And
beautifully
said. Yeah, absolutely. And we're getting questions, so I want to make sure we have some time to answer these questions here. So Vaughn's saying, which is a really, really good one to tie all this together. How can Holiday Insights fuel year-round growth, right? So everything that we've taken away from the Holiday Insights, how can we take that data and parlay it across all 12 months where it's going to make sense, right? Because at the end of the day, during this time, brands are spending a ton of money on advertising, on updating creatives, on staffing, logistics, product, everything. It's a huge expense, right? And I know a lot of folks want to triple down and capitalize and use it as much as possible for the remainder of the year and going into 2026. So what are some ways that this data and this insight can help fuel year-round growth?
Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I think the question is important, but also I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Like every year will be different. Every Black Friday, Cyber Monday will be different, and it's dangerous to say, "Hey, this playbook that worked this year will be the same playbook that will work next year." Last year, TikTok Shop was not as robust as it was this year, and it definitely made a huge change, like we just finished talking about, AMC for audience, so on and so forth. But I think from a macro perspective, whatever worked this season, how do we take this into long-term growth? Okay, a couple of ideas here. Okay, the products that worked well, are you positioning these as like evergreen products that you want to build around? Are these products that are just high margin that you're just trying to get as much profitability from? The ones who bought these products, utilizing AMC and understanding the audiences, were these new to brand customers? Were these returning customers? Are these existing that you're trying to remarket against your competitors? Are these that you're kind of cold prospecting, utilizing DSP, which is a little bit more top of funnel? Like, these are some very specific questions that all tie into what you want to do next year. Because even if product A does well, what does well mean? We have to quantify. Is well good now? Is well good for Q1 and Q2? Because what if you over-index on this product, but seasonality wise in Q1 and Q2, this product is a dud. Maybe it's really meant for just, the colder seasons, or maybe it's a product that people are looking to gift, not really purchasing Q1 or Q2. And that goes across, your 10 SKUs, your 100 SKUs. So it really needs to be an in-depth. I would focus on the first 3 months on understanding what went well in Q4 and how can these learnings inform you for your Q1 to Q3 strategy. It's not so much, because we crushed it in Q4, here's where this hockey stick is just going to keep going up in Q1, Q2, Q3. That's totally not what's going to happen, which is why, your sales trends are always going to have peaks and valleys. Even though you want the mean to be moving up consistently, it's never going to be a consistent hockey stick upwards where there's not anything going down. So I think the first learning here is understand what went well and how to leverage that information in a way that continually helps you move forward, but without the expectation that it's going to be a similar type performance. And I know that on surface seems like such a basic, hey, make sure you don't expect that it's going to crush it the same way in Q1. If I just, double the amount of ad spend and reach this double the amount of audience, a lot of brands sometimes think that way. Like, okay, well, if we crush it this way, let's keep dumping more fuel into this. But Q1 is not made the same way as Q4. Now in Q2, okay, you've understood what worked. You know who are your new to brand versus your returning customers. What's the next? Okay, well, let's have an ads conversation. We're definitely going to be having this ad conversation with Trellis, who we use for all of our brands, right? Okay, where can we safely scale? What is the ACoS threshold where we're good? Because maybe during this tentpole event, we were willing to eat a higher ACoS because we want to get more. But now that we're in low sales velocity, maybe we want to bring that down. What is the threshold that's good enough that you don't lose your everyday customer, but you're not over-indexing on top line growth? And really, it's not the time of year for you to push so hard ad spend wise. Okay, quarter 3, you understood what worked in quarter 1. You know what your ad spend strategy is in quarter 2. Let's start thinking about organic. We were talking about Rufus, we're talking about TikTok. You have to know what creative is starting to resonate. And with new things like, video and sponsored product pages and all the stuff that you can do now with, generative AI, there's going to be a lot of that that's going to be coming out this year. A lot. Whether you're working with an agency or you're going to use it directly from the console natively, where Amazon showed it at Unboxed at Nashville, where they're like, hey, you can just go in here and start generating videos yourself. Like, I've seen some nightmare fuel hallucination type videos that people don't want to see on Amazon, but then there are some who kind of know prompts well enough that they can generate their own videos. You're going to see a lot of that. So the creative aspect is also super duper important, so you can generate some of that click-through rate and conversion rate. Okay, just because you bring in the traffic, if the video isn't really resonating to your customer and you haven't put enough time into testing, and we heavily use PickFu, and there's a lot of other platforms out there, but how do you gather data to understand what creative will work, so that even though the ad piece is going to work and it's going to be super efficient for next year Q4, that the creative will line up as well? Because I guarantee you the trends, I saw this TikTok video last year or a couple of years ago. What was the trend? Minimalistic, super, the makeup company The Ordinary, the bottle is like a translucent white, the label is white, the text is like Helvetica. It's very, very clean. And that was like all the rage. Even all the luxury brands changed their type font to something that was sans serif and very clean and very minimal. And now what you're seeing is the opposite, and the pushback, where you're seeing a lot of supplements and nutraceuticals almost go for a maximalism type creative approach where it's heavy contrast, heavy colors, font with a lot of creative. Now, if you were to use the same type of design approach that was popular a couple of years ago to now, you're not going to stand out, right? And so it's so critical to break up the learnings into different action items, right? And then in Q4, by that point, you're not just trying to test with 30 days out. You're not just trying to learn 30 days out. You're not just trying to figure out and strategize 30 days out. You actually spent the last 3 quarters systematizing your learnings around margin and what you want to do on a scale perspective, deciding how you want to approach your ads, and then 3, how you actually want to test with data-driven results on what creative will resonate, and then you can ride the Black Friday, Cyber Monday wave of 2026. If you don't approach it that way, then again, we're going to have this conversation next year where people are asking in the, like, oh, what did I do wrong? It's not that you didn't do anything wrong, so you didn't do it soon enough, right? And you really want to be able to do it with enough time so that when we have these conversations, like we've been pointing out, it's backed by data and not just kind of personal assumptions what might work for next year. I hope that wasn't too convoluted. I hope that made kind of sense.
You got a true expert when he's answering it like that, So
I appreciate that.
Sorry, Teja.
I think doubling down on what Martin was saying, right? I think the way to look at your holiday season is I would say your cleanest and probably the highest volume stress test you can have for your business, right? Everything is exaggerated. All the demand is insanely high. There's a lot of competition as well, right? And so your conversion patterns get exposed. Your product market fit becomes important and obvious, right? And especially when you're launching new product lines, that's probably the best time to arguably launch these new product lines to see, can you pick off of that piggybacking, right? And now you understand what products work, what products don't work for you. And I think Martin said it best is Q4 is just not a seasonal anomaly. It's how do you learn from it and how do you understand at looking at it probably the clearest microscope lens to your business, to your product line, and understanding the data to say, how can I leverage this across all of next year, right? What are the winning offers that reveal your kind of evergreen pricing strategy, the discount thresholds that you can do throughout the year, right? You're going to have seasonal products, and the volume that you see just in a Q4, whether it's supplements, you see that in Q1. Right? So you know exactly what promotional strategy you need in Q1. Same thing with the importance on creatives, right? Giving you that creatives that gives you year-round messaging, right? You can have the same product, advertise it with a different emotion in Q4 than I would in January or the summertime, right? People are going to they're going to want to buy more. And so your creatives has to change every month. It's not here's Q4 creatives. How can I use this all year long? It's what can I learn off of that? And it kind of ties back to what I was saying earlier is build your audience and understand that audience and how that changes every quarter and have the messaging around that, I think is going to be key, right? And what bundles become apparent? What bundles can you run year long, right? You don't just have to run bundles and cross-sell opportunities just in Q4 when the demand is high. You can run that year long as well. So how do you figure that out? I think is analyzing all those data, is running as many experiments as you can in that high stress test window is going to allow you to see what of those experiments become permanent strategies for your business going year round.
I would just to wrap that up, I would say 2 things is there should be a level of experiments. If you're launching products, there's a pro in that you're getting a lot more traffic and can get momentum in kind of that honeymoon period during a peak time. If you're running experiments because this is your first Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and you don't have one to benchmark and go off of, you're not going off of one from last year, then you're kind of experimenting. But the data that you learn from this, you're just getting more data than you would get in other times. So, you're utilizing that, or maybe it's subscribe and save customers. You have good retention rate in a CPG brand. So you're taking this time. One of the worst things you can do though, is have a big Black Friday, Cyber Monday week and not make any money, because you discounted too much, or you experimented too much, or you spent too much in advertising, and you come out of Q4 into Q1 with just data because everything else, you gave away the farm. And that's honestly one of the worst feelings, to feel like you crushed it. And then when all the data comes through, you're just like, we over discounted or we over advertised. And I've just experienced that along with brands, probably a couple each year. And it's a horrible feeling to be looking at top line numbers and just be like, we really lost. So, I mean, for us, so much prep work is done way ahead of this holiday. Like Martin was saying, Q3, we are grinding to get not just the deals set up, but get any content ready, for Q4. It's kind of like the go time. It's like off season. Even if you're an evergreen brand, it's like off season. And this is really the go time where you stop making catalog changes. You stop doing things like that. Hopefully you've got the videos that are working, and you're just not, it can get so expensive with CPCs to just run experiments that you don't know work. So you can be testing creative. Like, I want to give a good example of a product that can switch right into Q1 is like, we have a gag gift brand, and right now it's gift giving and it's holiday and it's Christmas. Right after the first, we switched to April Fool's type of messaging and like that kind of thing. And it's the same product, same brand, but that is an example of one that switches like when it gets to Q1. So we take those learnings, we switch out the videos we're doing and messaging and things like that. So I think the simplest answer is, you're getting more data than you normally get. And so utilize that going forward. You can start making make changes, like depending on what you're selling, you might need to make sharp changes in January and dial back. Other products still do well into February, and so you don't dial back as fast. But if you're in year one, this is your chance to like try to document things and create that baseline. If this is year 2, year 3, that like they're not all the same. Hopefully you're just trying to get better each time. But for us, we're definitely trying to lean on what we've already tested up till now to then crush out through the holidays. Very rarely are we still just trying a random new video that we throw up or something. Like, we have been prepping in the off season, Q1, Q2, Q3 to get to this time, at least with our team.
Sweet. And I think it's key that, everyone knows this. I'm a huge fan of seasonal merchandising, and I think that's, very, very strong and a very, very easy play for a lot of brands to do. But guys, this was awesome. I love these kind of roundtable wrap-ups after these kind of events, because it really gives folks that are watching tangible, actionable insights and ways to move and do things after. So again, guys, thanks so much for hopping on with this. For anyone watching, we are going to send out the replay. We'll send out all the, the panelists' contact information, should you want to reach out to them on LinkedIn, their emails, all that sort of good stuff. But guys, again, thank you so much. And we hope you all had a really, prosperous Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And if you didn't, maybe these tips and insights will help you into the next one. But then again, guys, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.